Okay, guys, how are you? Okay, for those of you who cannot see me, the video is on YouTube, Jolie Artist / Jolie Artist, but I'm wearing a t-shirt that says, I woke up in the sleeve. And it is a reference to Altered Carbon. If you haven't read the book or seen this show on Netflix, I'd recommend that you check it out. The book is pretty cool because it does a good job of setting up like the narrative and the plot and world building. But essentially, to condense it, in the future, humanity has sort of utilized alien technology to figure out a way to back up our consciousness into something called a stack, right? And then it allows an individual to transfer their consciousness from one body to another body. And bodies are now called sleeves in the future. So this is an Altered Carbon reference. And it sort of deals a little bit with what this episode is going to be about, kind of loosely deals with what this episode is going to be about. I also kind of feel compelled to say that if you feel like I'm speaking really slowly, I would encourage you to speed up. Utilize the speed button on podcasts and you can listen to me faster. When I listen to my own podcasts, I listen to it at the max speed because it allows me to get the information in. It's a long, it's a 1 hour podcast, but if you speed it up, it can become a 30-minute podcast or even a 20-minute podcast. You get in the same information if your brain can, follow. And the more you do it, the more apt your brain will be to be able to follow the information. So unless you enjoy just the regular tempo of my voice, which is also, great, appreciate you. But just a suggestion, I usually mention it towards the end of the podcast or in the middle, but I said I'm going to lead with it this time in case you guys didn't know that was possible. So this episode is going to be called Gods and Monsters. And the reason why is because, let's backtrack. I normally, when I sit and record an episode, I normally don't know what I'm going to talk about, but this particular episode has been kind of swimming around my mind the last couple of days, and I would say probably the last, couple of decades as well. Every once in a while, when you talk to people, you hear them kind of make like spontaneous comments like, what if we're the aliens, right? When you talk about, the esoteric or, spiritual or even like the supernatural, whatever you want to call it, weird. People just kind of like without thought go like, what if we're the aliens? And I had a really great conversation, I think last week, with a friend of mine in South Africa. Shout out to Belo. And we were talking about, mushrooms and how they sort of affect the mind and, consciousness. And for those of you who aren't aware, so when you take a mushroom or magic mushroom, I'm not condoning it, just talking about it. This is not medical advice, and I'm not encouraging you to break the law. But going forward, when a person takes magic mushrooms, the way mushrooms work is that they affect a part of your brain that essentially keeps you from focusing. It suppresses that section of your brain. It also has been linked to fighting, like being more effective at treating depression. And some have even said like ADHD than any pharmaceutical drug on the market. So there's that. But by doing that, some have argued that it actually allows who you really are, your consciousness, which is who you really are. And I think I beat that nail over the head more than enough times, because at this point that you have to learn to separate consciousness from self. You are not the body. You're not the body. You're not the body. So you hear that, right? I guess I should finish my thought. So what the mushrooms do is it suppresses a part of your brain that's like that monkey mind, basically. Because by listening to that monkey mind, that's what keeps you from focusing, because you're kind of shifting away from what you're doing to like what the mind is suggesting and what it's saying and things like that. So it suppresses that, which subsequently also allows for your consciousness to come through the body. Now, what Bill and I were talking about is, in terms of, mushrooms, like how he asked me, what do I feel about that sort of like internal struggle? And when he asked me that, I kind of thought, I said this, I said, sometimes it's going to sound super weird, but this is a weird podcast. But sometimes I feel like there's like an internal struggle between consciousness and ego, right? I mean, I guess it doesn't sound weird when I put it in that way, but there is an internal struggle between consciousness and ego. Even when you meditate, right? That's that sort of battle, right? Like you have a mantra, you say you want to repeat that mantra, and yet, as you focus on your mantra, the ego comes in. I've called it a parasite. I've called it, a pain body over the years. I'm going to call it, for the sake of this conversation, we're going to call it an ego. Or some have used the term false self, monkey mind, whatever label you want to call it. We're all talking about the same thing. So the ego comes through. And now it's an internal struggle between this is my mantra and then the ego kind of wanting to do this thing. And the idea behind the exercise of practices or the idea behind behind practices such as, meditation and, yoga even, or, just any focus exercise really is to train the mind, right? So that you essentially control the mind so that when the monkey mind starts chattering, you can pull focus away from it and focus on what your intention is and what what to focus on. In time, you do it over and over again. Eventually, the mind, you tame the mind. It quiets the mind, or you learn to, at the very least, make it so that it's not so dominant over your thoughts and your thinking process, and thus, controlling your mind. So, you know what I mean? Or being controlled by your mind, as opposed to, your consciousness sort of being at the helm of the body. And so I said, there's that internal struggle, but every once in a while, there's a part of me that feels like, don't take this because, right? Don't take the mushrooms because, am I killing Joe? And people have even talked about this. Like if you Google like ego death, that is one of the things it like speaks to, right? The ego is the persona of the body, and essentially becoming conscious is killing the ego, right? And so when you have these sort of terminologies that have been kind of instilled in our mind, we accept them without sort of thinking deeply about what that means, especially even when they're coming from like people in like a spiritual scene. So I said, when I am, either meditating or, using the magic M, there's a part of me, even the ego, it's the ego that goes like, I don't, like something's taking over and I will no longer be. And that is the thing that ego fears. It's death, right? Because it knows that it does die. And so, philosophy, meditation, the magic M's, all these things do is essentially allow your consciousness to take over and suppress the ego. And that's what that struggle is, right? So what I said to him was, and I acknowledged that, that there's a part of me that goes like, I'm, for better or worse, that persona Joe is the persona that I've embodied and sort of been with, at least in this incarnation for my whole entire life in this incarnation, right? In this present incarnation. So of course there's a part of you that goes like, wow, what if I'm allowing something, you could say, is it the fungi intelligence like coming in and like taking over? What if I'm allowing something to come in and sort of, turn me into something else and sort of lose who I was? But then there's another part of me that goes like, fuck that bitch. Like she's super fucking negative and I don't want to deal with that. Like that ego has also caused, the greatest amount of stress and chaos and suffering in my life, right? With the constant negativity and the constant worry and, and just like constantly coming up with things to be afraid of. So we said that and we kind of laughed about it. And the conclusion was, so if the ego dies, it dies. If it dies, it dies. Like I'd rather be a more conscious being, right? And completely destroy and completely get rid of the ego than live the way I've lived, in the past or whatever, because that's suffering. And all that comes with that is it's suffering. But, after the conversation, I kind of sat back and, I think we talked might have been on Friday. So I've been kind of stewing on this since Friday and it's Monday, Memorial Day, happy Memorial Day. But I thought about it and I started kind of rethinking certain things, certain phrases that we've heard, right? Like the ego is the enemy, or kill the ego, death to the ego. Those sort of like I mean, they mean well, but when you think on it, they do kind of carry, obviously, like negative connotations. If the biggest thing that your ego is afraid of is death, and you're coming for, you're kind of playing with this idea of, okay, I've got to kill my ego, right? I got to kill who I am. A lot of people there's going to be resistance with that. I mean, I kind of struggled with that because we are so strongly identified with the self. I mean, that's part of our programming in this reality. Is you're so identified, particularly in the West, so identified with the self. That's what strengthens the ego. And then I thought, I think I spoke in a couple episodes ago about lichens. Okay, so a lichen, as a refresher, it's an organism that is a conglomeration of various other organisms. So it's plant matter, bacteria, and fungi. And I'm sure I'm forgetting one more, but they're living together in one sort of community, and they have now formed a new organism, and that is called a lichen. And in the book, I believe it's called Entangled Life, and I believe, I can't remember the author's name, but it's about mushrooms. I want to see if I can maybe look it up real quick, because I think it was like Melvin Sheldrake. I want to say it's Melvin Sheldrake is the author. Hold on, I don't want to like accidentally hit play and then throw it off. Bear with me, guys. Sorry. I want you guys to check it out. So Merlin Sheldrake is his name, and the book is called Entangled Life. And so he kind of broke it down, and at the end of his like discussion on how these sort of species kind of work together to create a whole new organism, he basically said, and the human body is a lichen as well. And the reason why he said that is like, well, think about it. So you have your gut bacteria, and you have like fungi in your gut too, yeast and things of that nature, that if you, for example, took like an antibiotic that completely killed all of the bacteria in your body, it would not bode well for you. You wouldn't be able to digest certain kinds of foods, or at least it'd be harder for your body to do so. You probably wouldn't expel wastes as frequently, which cause other issues. So we have sort of taken in these bacteria, and they work in our system, even like serotonin, right? These bacteria in your gut also produce like things like serotonin and dopamine that you need in order to maintain a well-balanced, state of mind. So it's been theorized, or even straight up just declared by medical professionals, things of that nature, that people who suffer with like things like depression and even ADD and things like that are because they have like their gut flora is like in balance. So it is important, especially if after you take an antibiotic, it's important to follow up with probiotics. And then more and more doctors are starting to even prescribe probiotics for certain gut disorders like IBS, C, and IBS, D as well. So clearly there's things in and even on your body that are working in tangent with your physical body to maintain a level of homeostasis, right? That you cannot necessarily function properly without, right? So he basically said, you are a lichen, the human body is a lichen. And that I kind of played with as well. So I took that conversation that I had with Bello, and then I took that thought of, okay, we're already lichens. And even antibiotics, right? Like antibiotics is penicillin is a type of fungi, and you utilize. So when antibiotics were discovered, right? You take penicillin, you put it in your body, right? And then you allow the fungi to kill the bacteria, and that's how people would get over, bacterial infections and things of that nature. So intentionally utilizing, bacteria and fungi, right? Probiotics or bacteria, and, penicillin, antibiotics are fungi. And we take these things and we put them in our body for the, explicit purpose of making our body function in a particular way, right? In an optimal way, and to heal our body, right? And so I was like, okay, cool. So I took that and I kind of stored it. And that then made me think, okay, well, if a fungi, like a magic mushroom or whatever, does contain its own intelligence, right? And you, by imbibing it like a probiotic or, antibiotic, you take it in with the intent of changing the structure of your body so that it operates more efficiently. What's so wrong with that? Because people say, okay, you take these, these magical mushrooms or whatever with the intent of killing the ego. And I feel like that's really aggressive. You know what I mean? That's really aggressive. And I don't know if that's necessarily how it works, because you're still you in a way, right? You're just allowing more of your consciousness to come through. It's not necessarily a death of who you are, more of you have been infected, for lack of better phrasing, by, a thought form. I've theorized that it could, what has predisposed humanity to this sort of negative mind state. And as wild as it sounds, it is what it is. Okay, but my theory is that what has predisposed humanity to this negative mind state is some sort of, non-corporeal, energetic thought form or energetic, parasite that feeds on the negative energy that we generate, right? So think about it like as a bad bacteria, but instead of bacteria, like a non-corporeal entity. And I just put out a video, I think yesterday, Sunday night, on my TikTok, basically like really like doubling down on this thought process, because I'm just like, I know people are just going to watch this video and like not think about what I'm saying, So I'm like, I'm going to keep saying it until it sinks in. Listen, okay, we have been programmed to perceive, like when you think about extraterrestrials, you automatically picture like a gray or, a reptilian or things of that, things of that nature, but it's humanoid. Even if it's a Klingon, it's humanoid, right? We don't think beyond the physical, beyond the body. We just assume, okay, we are intelligent and we are arguably the most intelligent species on this planet, arguably. If you can see my face, I'm rolling my eyes. If you cannot see my face, rather, I'm rolling my eyes. But arguably, humanity is the most intelligent species on this planet. But are we though? I mean, more and more scientists are starting to say, like mycelium, fungi, they have their own intelligence. Listen, you have to be intelligent. So even parasites, Toxoplasmosis gondii, I feel like I always talk about this. Toxoplasmosis gondii, okay, hijacks the nervous system of a rat to make it no longer fear cats, so that it walks up to a cat, so that the cat consumes the rat, yeah, because then the parasite can proliferate more, I guess, effectively in the body of a cat. That's intelligence. Like, we're so arrogant. Like, humanity's so fucking arrogant that we just go like, okay, intelligence can only take the form of something that looks kind of like us. Like, what the shit is that? What is that? That is arrogant at best and dangerous, at worst, because like we're closing our minds to so many possibilities. If you only think that something can occur in one particular way, just because you believe it doesn't make it so, right? So for example, was it 200 years ago, doctors didn't really understand like that you needed to wash your hands after you had surgery. So doctors would go and like deliver a baby, and then they wouldn't like wash their hands after delivering like a baby. Not C-section, like they're going in and pulling babies out a lot of the times. And then they would just go from another woman to another woman to another woman. And a lot of women started getting infections and then dying. Okay. Now this one doctor came along, I think he was a French doctor, and though he was a bit like aggressive with his like, he was very adamant about like, guys, wash your fucking hands. That's gross. Like there's got to be something that you're transmitting from woman to woman. If you would just take soap and water and like clean your hands, I feel like this will stop this from happening. And of course, people didn't listen to him because they just straight up didn't believe him. And he got shunned and ostracized, but he tried the practice in his, of washing his hands in his practice. And sure enough, the amount of women that were getting infections like dramatically decreased. But think about all the women who suffered because, the arrogance of all the other doctors just didn't want to listen. to just wash your fucking hands. Like, how hard is it to just wash your hands? But it was like, no, we just know, we don't believe what you're saying, and we just know that it's okay for us to keep doing this, right? An ego, right? So the doctors felt that, like, at the end of the day, if they were covered with blood and like bodily fluids, the more they had on them, the more that it showed that they, had worked really hard that day. So of course it was an ego boost. But meanwhile, people are getting infected, right? Women are getting infected and dying simply because they just don't want to, like, put their ego aside, wash their hands, right? So if you think that kind of thought process is only something that happened in the past, think again. Like, that is even another sign of arrogance, to just think that, okay, well, people in the past were dumb, like, we aren't capable of doing dumb shit. Like, please believe, like, 50 years from now, we're going to look back on a lot of the shit that we're doing now and go, like, well, wow, that was really stupid, right? Like, the way we look back at ads, of doctors telling women to, like, to smoke cigarettes, just prescribing cigarettes, right? Those ads look ridiculous to us now, but, like, they weren't ridiculous back then. And I'm sure that there were some people saying, hey, maybe it's not a good idea to take smoke, I guess, and, like, inhale it into your lungs and all these chemicals. And I'm sure they were laughed at, right? And I'm sure that the tobacco companies who profited off of selling, these sort of toxic products to people, did what they needed to do to suppress people knowing this information so that they can continue to make money. If you think that that has stopped or that has gone away, like, it hasn't, So I'm saying that, look, we have been programmed to think that, okay, intelligent life forms can only show up the way we would show up, right? Because that's how we travel. Right? We don't know any other way of traveling, right? At least the majority of us don't know any other way of traveling. There are other people who have said, like, you can travel, on the astral plane. You can jump dimensions, via astral projection. That's one way of traveling. Some people have said you can travel to other dimensions using psychedelics like DMT. That's another way of traveling, but that's not, the status quo. That's not what most people believe, most scientists believe and operate under, right? They believe, okay, if we're going to go to another planet, we need to use, a spaceship, right? So you have NASA and you have, Elon Musk company and what's his name, Jeff Bezos company as well, where they're trying to physically travel from from our planet to another planet. To me, I feel like, well, that's a really inefficient way to travel, because you're, you know what I mean? But hey, that's what's, the prevailing ideology right now, right? So because we travel that way, like, we use, machines to travel, we just assume, well, any other intelligent life form just like us, would look just like us, maybe with pointy ears or a messed up face or big fangs or whatever, but still bipedal, symmetrical and humanoid, and would also travel, by machine, by spaceship. So of course, the majority of shows that you watch about, aliens coming, or movies about aliens coming, they all take the form of some sort of, like, humanoid just like us, and they show up in a spaceship and say, take me to your leader. So that's what we're expecting, So much so that when we see the UFOs or the UAPs, we're not thinking, like, these could be, like, non-physical. Like, we're saying, okay, these things are violating our laws of physics. And my thought is that maybe because they're not physical, like, maybe they're photonic, right? Maybe they're non-corporeal. Maybe it's a different kind of technology that we can't even wrap our minds around, because we're still so programmed to think in terms of how we see things and how we would operate. Okay, so I'm beating this shit. I'm beating it over the head, okay? Because it is important. It is important for you guys to kind of start thinking in a different way. So if it's not that, like, if a plant can be intelligent, whether or not you think that they're intelligent, simply because, like, there are human beings who don't even think, come on, the majority of us, right? Don't even think other human beings are intelligent simply because they don't know what you know. That's weird. You know what I mean? Like, somebody asked me, have you taken an IQ test? Because, like, you seem like you're, like, intelligent. Why do I need to take an IQ test? Who came up with the IQ test? If I seem intelligent, it's because I'm intelligent. But taking a test, an IQ test, only tests a particular type of intelligence. Hello, is this thing on? So like, no, I don't need to take an IQ test. Like, I know I'm intelligent. I know you're intelligent, right? But we create these set of standards. I think it was Einstein. This is a quote that's attributed to Einstein, which is basically like, if you judge a fish by its ability, like, don't judge a fish, I'm paraphrasing here, don't judge a fish, right, by its ability to climb trees, so to speak. That's what we're doing. And we're applying our understanding of what intelligence is to us, to ourselves, and then projecting it out there. And then we're saying, well, if we're not seeing it, like, for example, saying, oh, we're all alone, right? We're the only intelligence out there. By our metrics of what intelligence is, by our standards of what intelligence is. But more and more people are saying, hey, these like people, for example, who ayahuasca, in South American societies, they take the plant, and they knew the specific combination. You guys have heard this. They knew the specific combinations of 2 different plants put together to make them have a particular trip, right? And the 2 plants worked in tandem with each other so that one would would help neutralize the other so that you can have a trip. And they'd ask the people who, were using these plants in South America, how did you guys know this? And they said, the plants told us. Now, you tell a Westerner that, and the Westerner rolls their eyes and the plants can't, communicate with it. Well, they're not. Just because you don't believe something doesn't make it not true. Stop being so closed-minded, right? Now you have, people who study mycelium, and they're starting to say, like, no, these things, like, have their own mind. Like, they are an intelligence, and every time you imbibe it, you're taking into yourself a certain type of intelligence that more or less could, that does obviously change you. Okay. So now some people listening to this are probably thinking, gosh, like, I don't want to imbibe an intelligence. It's going to dramatically change me. And I feel you, because once again, that's the ego coming in. So I'm trying to I'm going to put it all together. What is the approach? Well, have you guys ever heard people say, like, kind of make not off color, but just sort of like unthinking comments like, what if we're the aliens? We're the aliens, right? Because we sit on Earth and we look around and we see all these sort of animals and these other, behaving in one particular way, and we just kind of stick out as the anomaly, right? So of course we go like, no, it's us. Like, we're the invaders, we're the aliens, because we don't fit. And people kind of make that comment and then don't think beyond it, or most people make the comment and don't think beyond it. But I want to take that and sort of run with it. I've sort of grappled with and talked about the simulation hypothesis and how it applies. How it applies, to this world. And I said, this world is a type of simulation, right? It's just, we're judging it by our standards, by our understanding of how simulations work, but it is a type of simulation. We just haven't been able to wrap our minds around what type of simulation it is. But I'm going to attempt to do that now. Think about it, let me just kind of tell you guys a story. So imagine a very old civilization of non-corporeal beings, species. If you're familiar with Star Trek, if you watch a lot of Star Trek, they delve into this a lot, right? About, entities who have evolved beyond needing physical form. But then what happens is, I don't remember the episode, but there was this one particular episode where they contacted these species who had evolved beyond needing bodies. But then when they interacted with the fleet, they sort of started realizing how much they missed living in bodies and wanting to taste things and touch things and feel things or whatever. So they just straight up started hijacking the bodies of the crew. You know what I mean? And then there was a whole debacle there. And, you watch that kind of stuff and you think outwards, oh my gosh, that's interesting. You never stop and apply that shit to yourselves, right? At least I didn't until this weekend. And I was thinking so the Big Bang in Michio Kaku's book, I think it was called Parallel Worlds. He talked about how No, was it Parallel Worlds? One of his books, let's just say Parallel Worlds, because that's what popped up in my mind. I think that's what it is. He talked about how, like, at at the Big Bang, right? Something must have come through, like, because like DNA, for example, like doesn't make sense. Like the way it is evolved, it almost seems like it kind of evolved from nothing. But in order for like it just the way he explained it, I'm not doing a good job of explaining it right now, but basically he's saying that like DNA did not originate from here. Like just if you study it, it doesn't make any sense that it's from here, so to speak. So his thought process was that, you know, if one world was ending, as one world ended, you know, they would have to find a way to send information in order to allow for their civilization, right, a very advanced species of something, as they experience their world ending, would sort of have used or may have used, you know, their understanding of how, you know, reality works to send bits of themselves through wormholes as their world ended into our reality. And that could, you know, could have very well been like DNA. And I'm arguing that it could also have been like consciousness, right? So let's say we, humanity, right? Human beings, the consciousness in human beings. This is like a fun theory that just like I'm playing with, but I'm liking how it feels, right? The consciousness of humanity originated somewhere else in a civilization where, you know, they were just hyper intelligent, very structured, and had evolved past using like physical form, right? And then something happened, their world was ending, maybe their sun was exploding or something like that. And they needed to find a way to sort of continue on, right? Continue experiencing a material world. So maybe in this civilization, you know, they always consciousness, right? Because consciousness always is, but they had different physical bodies than we do now, right? So as their world was ending, they found a way to package their consciousness and send it through a wormhole into this reality, into this universe, right? And then as it settled, you know, through cosmic dust or a micrometer, right? Whatever it is, right? As it settled, the Big Bang was actually their world ending. So this is actually I'm combining a lot of theories here. There's something called, and I've talked about this before, the Big Bounce theory that said that the beginning of our universe was like actually the end of another one's. So I'm combining a lot of these theories to kind of come up with this narrative, right? If consciousness always has been, yeah, then it would kind of make sense. Like if you watch where we're going, like eventually we will too sort of evolve past bodies and maybe end up like, that's where it seems like we're going anyway. So you take the human form and then you start kind of melding it with machines. And now people are talking about uploading their consciousness or being able to, in the future, like 100 years from now, upload their consciousness into different types of bodies or eventually into machines and things of that nature. So we're thinking about it, right? And some people are working towards that. Even storing your consciousness in a hologram, all of that stuff. Yeah. My thing is, I've said, you know, time is a loop, life is a loop, and things repeat themselves. Even people loop in their own lives. Like I have a really good friend, I'm not going to talk about her name, but she calls me and we talk, and I find that like every 6 months or so, whatever issue she's calling me to like talk to me about or talk out with me is something that she had already sort of gone through 6 months prior or a year prior. And I always say the same thing, like this is a cycle, like it's the same cycle, you know, like the same loop, like what's going on, and just kind of calling her, you know, awareness to it so that she can make a different decision. Because if she's not aware she's doing something, then clearly we'll keep doing it. But I've even paused and examined my own life and caught myself like, okay, I'm just repeating cycles, like this is a loop. And that's just within my own life. Same thing happens even in families. Like you'll have like something that has been passed on from one family to another, like some kind of behavior, or, you know, they call it like curses. They're not curses, they're just patterns of behavior that people aren't aware of. And so they're just sort of repeating it, and it's a loop. And they say history repeats. And I did that one video about, you know, us destroying ourselves and uncontacted tribes like coming through and then discovering our, you know, basically doing the same thing we've done, and just it's the same loop, the same cycle over and over again. So who's to say, like, how long has this fucking cycle been going on, right? And if we're not fully even aware, you know, of it happening, then of course it's just going to keep happening over and over and over again. So combining all of the theories, the big bounce was actually the end of one, you know, multiverse where our consciousness and our DNA, the DNA that we have now sort of seeded into this planet, into this, you know, into Earth or whatever, came through some sort of wormhole, right? And then we came in and we terraformed this planet. Not aliens. We're the aliens, right? And we terraformed this planet to allow, you know, plants and animals and things of that nature to kind of have that, like a zoo, right? So a collection of, let's say, this civilization that we came from that had been destroyed was actually very sort of like large and diverse, right? So you had, you know, each like ethnic group that you meet, like that, you know, have been kind of relegated to different society, to different, what do you call it, continents or whatever, actually had their own planet in this world, right? The world prior. Stay with me. Like, it sounds wild, but play with the idea. I mean, it's not illegal to think different things, right? But this is what I've been kind of playing with. And I'm pulling from a lot of theories that scientists already believe in. So it's not that much of a stretch. A lot of the things that I talk about sound a bit like far-fetched at first, but if you think about it deeply and actually do the research and read the things, you know, the books that I mentioned, like it, you would more or less come to the same conclusions too. Or you might just be listening to me and saying, like, you know what, this actually makes sense, right? Because people have also played with the idea of like, okay, Earth is a kind of zoo. And I don't like that because it also belittles like humanity and it belittles this world. But it certainly is a collection of species that seem like they've been collected from like different places. Like this is like a kind of ark, like Noah's Ark, but removing the biblical sort of, you know, connotations to that and just saying like, you know, if there was a world prior to us where we truly came from, our consciousness, our ever existing consciousness, who you really are, came from, right? And it was sort of multi-planetary. So you have like Africans, but they had their own like planet, right? That was like warm and, you know, their own sort of, you know, behaviors, and they had pyramids and things like that, right? And then you have the Europeans and you have the, you know, South Americans and, you know, the Asians and everything like that. But each ethnic group that we sort of interact with now, right? Maybe had their own planet and their own, you know, like plants and their own animals and things like that. And so when they saw, like, let's say like their son was about to die, and I know you guys, some of you are probably thinking like, oh, like Superman. If you aren't thinking about it, then I'm telling you now, like, think like Superman. Like as Krypton was dying, right? They packaged Superman or whatever and like sent him through. But this is an idea that scientists have actually played with and have taken seriously. Like Google like panspermia, right? But I'm just taking that and I'm like building on it because I'm an artist and writer and that's what I like to do. So imagine that literally like the world before this one, before the Big Bang, yeah, there was this like, you know, crazy advanced civilization, and they actually worked in tangent with each other. And then as their world was ending, they found a way to store their consciousness into, you know, something microscopic, microscopic intelligence. Once again, stop thinking that intelligence only has to take a particular shape and size. It doesn't. Right? Especially if, you know, scientists are saying now that wormholes, you know, are the ones that they're at least aware of are like too small to like physically travel to. But that's our limitation right now, presently. It would not be a limitation for such a society, you know, that like discussing. So maybe they had access to wormholes or could just generate wormholes and were able to send out their consciousness. So obviously they didn't die, right? It was just their planet that was dying, right? And we're trying to seed our planet, right? We're trying to form different colonies on Mars and things like that. So where is that energy even coming from, right? Well, why can't we just be content with where we are? So I feel like there's something in the DNA that is driving us, some sort of information, some sort of memory, right? In our DNA that is driving us to want to seed, the galaxy and sort of like, in a sense, create the same world that we may have just come from. This is cool. This is cool, and it's not as far-fetched as it sounds. And I think that the more you think about it, the more it does make sense. Yeah. And so they sent their consciousness through, and then we, came to Earth, and we set up everything like plants and just rebuilt everything, right? And then we took, we are the Anunnaki. Right? I don't believe that bullshit about the Anunnaki coming here and enslaving humanity and to make them fucking mine gold. That's so dumb. Of all the planets that you will fly past theoretically to come to Earth, there's dripping with diamonds and gold. I just find it really hard that if you have the technology to physically travel that far, you wouldn't be coming here for gold. So I would say that maybe we are the Anunnaki, right? And then we took the primates and stuff like that were already here, right? And then we imbued ourselves, I guess in a way, hijacked the bodies of the primates and stuff like that were already here, and imbued them, to use a biblical analogy. I'm not a Christian, but I do like to pull from different things. So to use a biblical analogy, breathe, it's not even just biblical, even the Gnostics believe this, breathe consciousness, transferred consciousness into the Homo sapien, right? The ones who know, body, and then started, and then stored some of their intelligence in fungi and things like that, and in different plants and everything like that, and then started to slowly start rebuilding a civilization in a new reality, in a new universe, right? It's not as far-fetched as it sounds. And so then as we are, quote, evolving, it's not really an evolution. It's more of a involution in a way, right? So the opposite, where we're kind of becoming more of what we were, if that makes sense, right? So now that monkey mind or reptilian brain, all of that starts to make sense if our consciousness came from a different world, but our DNA came in and obviously uploaded ourselves to the primate body, right? That primate body has, evolved or whatever. And then we were the ones who sort of acted as a catalyst. Consciousness, when I say consciousness, I don't mean it in an esoteric form. I mean specifically non-corporeal entities who had evolved past bodies, and they're just mind, and they know how to manipulate matter, right? That level of advanced, okay? And so they come in, and we come in, and we take the forms that were already here and start kind of creating or constructing lichens of a sort, because that's just what we do. And so now you have consciousness in a body. And let's just say there was a time in human history when this was common knowledge. I like to say, I'm not telling you stuff, I'm not teaching you guys, I'm just reminding you of stuff that you already know. So if it feels whoa, this is actually resonating with me, then then maybe it's just because it's a memory that's stored or locked somewhere. But let's say that, thousands of years ago, hundreds of thousands of years ago, right? Humanity knew this. We knew of our origins, because we were conscious, right? And we knew that we were existing within this body, and that's okay, because it's not about the body. It's about experiencing a new reality. And that's just what our race did, right? The non-corporeal entities that we really are. That's what we did. That's how we would seed ourselves, right? Throughout galaxies, and we would, hijack, life forms. I say hijack, it has such a negative connotation. I don't mean it as negatively as it sounds. I just can't think of another word to use right now. But take over, that's not any better. So let's just go hijack because I like it. But hijack life forms that are already there, and then we would just reconstruct things, and that's just what we did. We're just a creator class, gods, right? Gods. Yeah. See, I'm putting it all together. So we come in. We do our thing because that's what we do. We're creators. And now let's say it was 100,000 years ago. Let's say it was even 1,000,000 years ago. We don't know. We just don't know. And then something happened, like some great catastrophe happened. And so that information kind of got lost, like passed on, but still, and stored in the DNA, but still lost. And now here we are. Like fragments are here and there, right? We know, like Vedic, writings tell you you're not your body. You're God. This is a game. This is a simulation, right? We keep saying that, but not really thinking deeply about what that means, right? But really, I want you to take that ideology and really bring it to the forefront of your consciousness and make yourself aware that it's you're older than, and it's bigger than your present incarnation, right? You would almost have to be a god to be able to reincarnate over and over again. Like literally anybody that says, okay, I remember my past incarnations, if it's possible, and they're saying that it is. So at this point in time, there have been scientific studies where they have, talked to children and they've written this down. So accept it. Then if that's the point, if that's the case, that it is possible for a mind to transfer from one body to another, as in the case of reincarnation, then clearly you don't die. Like just the body dies and then you move on, right? You just transfer to another body. And then we also know how time works in this reality. And that's just another law of our reality. It's just the law of nature, is that at any point in time, your consciousness can also travel back and replay or redo that consciousness, and also shift as well to parallel universes. I would say that whatever entity was able to do what I've just explained to you, which is like project themselves through a wormhole into a new galaxy, would also possess the technology to jump, from reality to reality. I mean, we do that now. Like we're barely even aware of what we're doing. So taking all of that sort of credit that we give to God, and even though the Bible says like you are God, we don't think deeply about what that means. So literally, I don't think what I'm saying even violates anybody's like mindset, depending on whatever religion that you subscribe to, Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Gnosticism. I'm saying the same thing. I'm pulling it all together, and they're saying the same thing, that, it's not your physical form, right? What a God would be all-knowing, all-powerful, more or less, right? Give or take, right? In the sense of it would be able to shift from realities or come back and reincarnate the same form, right? So it's not that far-fetched when you really think deeply about it. And so then I took that and I said, now how does that fit with the ego? I said all that build up to say this. How does that fit with your ego? Well, think about it. So I started this podcast talking about how we're basically encouraged to go to war with the ego. Why? Why do that? What's the point? There's no point. All that does is create conflict. I heard a quote saying that every time the U.S. declares war against something, it just gets worse, right? War against terrorism ended up in the Middle East forever, right? War against drug, like, see how that's turning out, right? So every time you declare war against something, right, that which you resist persists. And then I think about the lichen, organism. They work together, right, in tandem with each other. Right? And I think about even the organisms in your own body. If you were to say, I declare war on the bacteria in your body, and you are able to kill all the bacteria in the body, guess what? You lose too. So I don't know. And I've sort of played with that idea of like killing the ego, whatever. But the more I think about it, and I reserve the right to change my mind at any point in time, right? A foolish consistency is a hobgoblin of little minds. So I reserve the right to change my mind, and I'm going to do that, or at least to grow as far as my thinking is concerned. So I don't think killing your ego is the answer. I understand that. I've also said, like, you have this parasitic life form that is responsible for the negative thoughts, right? And I would argue that it is there, right? It's there. But then your ego is, and I've said this on my other podcast, The Dark Oracle's Guide to the Multiverse, the ego is the persona, right? It's the personality of your body. It is the Siri to your cell phone, right? So you don't really want to go in and destroy Siri because it serves a function, right? But if Siri is misfiring, then Siri has a virus. So I'm separating, and I'm saying that that parasitic entity that is responsible for the persona in your body constantly, being negative has been infected. So not you, but your persona, your ego has been infected by something, some sort of non-corporeal energetic life form. See, I'm pulling it all together, some sort of non-corporeal energetic life form that is negative and that has predisposed or, hijacked the ego and is leaning it towards the negative. So it's not the ego itself, right? If the ego is your Siri, right, to your body, and you are just like, you're not your phone, right? You're the controller. So your cell phone has Siri, but then it also has you, the controller. So there's two entities controlling things, right? So your ego is just essentially the operating system, with the voice of the operating system. But just like your cell phone can get a virus, your computer can get a virus, like your body has this mind virus, this negative mind virus. But I don't think it's the ego. I think it's something else. And then the way that you now deal with that is you take an antiviral, treatment, and that would be the magic M or whatever, and that would be meditation as well, because you also want to treat the ego. Because the biggest issue with the ego isn't that it exists, right? It's not about killing it, right? Which I think is what we've been getting it so wrong all along. It's not about killing the ego. That just creates more conflict, right? It's there, right? It's about healing it. It's not about killing it. It's about healing it so that you can now live in a symbiotic relationship with your body. So caring for your body, not fighting the voice of your body, but caring for it. So this is a dramatic turn from, I guess, my previous sort of thought processes, but I like the way this feels better. And more importantly, pulling it all together, consciousness in the body, in a way, is a parasite as well. Because the energy that you're constantly sort of generating when you're negative or when you're positive, right? That, especially when you're negative, that breaks down the body over time, which tells me that energy isn't necessarily like natural for this body. So if you're constantly in a negative state, right? Constantly angry, the body it starts to get sick. Right? It can't handle those constant bursts of negativity, which tells me that there's something else. Your consciousness in it is the one generating that negative energy, right? That this parasite, I might have to revisit this, or maybe just re-listen to this so that it kind of sinks in. But there's a lot of moving parts here. Like even doctors will say, like neuroscientists will say, like your mind has two minds. They've done studies on this. Your mind has two personalities. They've done studies on this when they say, like, if you ask a left brain, like you separate the two, like a patient who's had their, I forget what it is, something colossal that kind of binds the left brain to the right brain. If you separate that and then you ask your left brain a question and you ask the right brain a question, oftentimes you get two different answers. So that is already a thing where they're saying like there's actually two personas in you, right? And then I started this saying like you've got all of these organisms in your body. You're not alone. Like even if you're just like, oh, it's just me. Like it's really not you. I mean, that's demonstrated every time you meditate, right? If you want to focus on this mantra and this voice is talking, who's this voice? You're not alone, right? You've got, bacteria and fungi in your gut. You're not alone. You have all of these cells that kind of comprise who you are. You're not alone. So it's not that far-fetched to now say like, okay, so your body is your cell phone, right? Your mind, the ego, is your Siri, right? What is causing Siri to misfire and constantly say negative things that sort of drain you? And the way it drains you is by constantly getting you your consciousness, which is something else over here, right? That hijacked the body. Put it all together. So your consciousness we came through from another world. We hijacked this primate body or whatever so that we can experience this reality. We're the aliens, okay? You have to then, and understand that consciousness is the one that's generating that energy, right? The negative energy as well as the positive energy. Like when you're angry and you shoot it out, you can feel the pain in your chest. It's not something that is natural for your body, right? But it's something that will harm your body should you persist in that kind of behavior. But it's your consciousness that's generating it. It's all energy. And this thing, right, has sort of like hijacked and infected Siri. So then what's the cure, right? What's the solution, mind you? Well, the solution isn't destroying, and some people might not like this, but hear me out. I don't think the solution is destroying Siri, right? It's not destroying the ego. I think it's healing and calming the ego, right? It's working and creating a symbiotic relationship with the ego, not a parasitic relationship, not a relationship where you're constantly at battle. So, for example, what I said to one of my friends, she has a lot of like anxiety and anxious thoughts, and she said, so when I talked to her about this, thought form in her mind, she said, okay, well, when it came to her, she was like, shut up, shut up, parasite. And I was like, that just generates more negative energy. Why not be a conscious, calming influence, right? And what I mean by that is if we are the aliens, right? Like, and by we, I mean our consciousness is the alien, right? That has sort of hijacked the body of this like primate body, right? The monkey mind or whatever is native to the body. And so we are trying to form a lichen relationship with this body. And we've been trying to do so for, a long time, right? Taming the beast. The body is the beast, right? You're a god in a monster, right? And I don't mean that in a negative, way, but gods and monsters. So you're God in a monster, right? You're a non-corporeal entity in a beast, right? The body is the beast. The body is an animal. But you have to tame the beast. You don't have to kill the beast. You have to tame the beast so that you can work in tangent with, is it tangent or tandem? Let's say tandem. With the beast, right? So imagine your body and your ego as like a horse. And a horse has a personality, right? And it's wild and it's scared because it's been wild and all it knows to do is survive. And then here you come as a civilizing energy and you get on the horse's back to ride it. Okay, now how do you deal with that? Do you beat it into submission? Do you drug it? Right? Or are you gentle with it and slowly show that, what, it's okay. Trust me, I got it. Everything's going to be okay. And so that's what I said to my friend. I said, the next time you have that thought, just say, it's okay. It's okay. Instead of fighting with that voice, recognize that, okay, there's something happening. It's scared, right? The ego is afraid. That's why it lashes out in the way that it does. A lot of the times when you're getting negative comments from people, a lot of the times when you're getting people, that saying mean things to you, it's fear because something is happening, the ego is communicating to them and they're not conscious enough, right? They're still trying to like control the body, but the body is in control. And all the body knows is what most animals know, which is survival and fear. But you are a civilizing energy. And I don't mean that in like a, like a colonizing kind of way, but I mean like you are God, right? The real you is love, right? God is love. Love is the most powerful force on this planet. We are love, right? Put it all together. Put in the Gnostics teaching, put in the Buddhist teaching, like put it all together. I think it makes sense. So then you say to the ego, you don't say, fuck off, parasite. You say, it's okay. I'm in control now, but I'll take care of you. It's okay, right? Because then it's like, it allows you to do things like take care of your body instead of just going, oh, fuck the body. I'm going to beat my body. And, back in like, the 1700s and stuff like that, like, priests that would like flog themselves like with like cat o' nine tails or whatever. And like, just rip like just that kind of energy. Like, that's not how you would tame, a horse, not very well, right? Or a dog. So really, more and more growing and learning to kind of separate, okay, I'm consciousness, right? Having this sort of experience, like, and the simulation is that you are mortal. That is a simulation. You're having a mortal experience, right? And all that comes with it. But the most important thing here, the key to it all, is taming the beast. By first getting rid of the virus, right? And not feeding it, right? But also taming the beast. Let me know what you guys think. I'm running out of time here. All right. Always fun. Always great. Thank you guys for listening all the way through. See you guys next week. Take care.